So I want to talk to Jason, our lead researcher for foreign affairs and everything really shady. He was a military intel guy and has worked with me now for how many years, Jason?
About 6 years.
And has been on the border and looking at the border for the last year as we watched these things start to come through. Because I have a long-term theory that this is the last piece of the chalkboard that I did at Fox, that the destabilization of the United States that happened over in Europe. Remember, it would start in the Middle East, a caliphate, then it would spread to Europe, and it would destabilize Europe, and then it would come here. What happened? Well, all of these migrants came up, all these immigrants came from the Middle East and pushed up into Europe, destabilizing it because they were not blending in, they were not living by the rules, it was causing real chaos. That's what's destabilized Europe. Now, the same thing is happening here. It's come to America exactly as we outlined, 8-9 years ago. So, who is controlling this? Tonight at 5 o'clock, we're doing a show and a chalkboard outlining who really is behind all of this. Of course, we found Soros money, but that's not the real story.
We looked at this, I think, back last April.
Yeah.
And it was easy to find the Soros connections. And that's like, at this point, that's like trying to find Kevin Bacon in a movie, a connection. It's so easy now.
There, yeah.
So that's not the interesting thing. When we talked about this last April, we were like, who is directing these caravans? Who's organizing? We know that this has got to cost an insane amount of money just in the water alone. Mm-hmm. So who was behind it? And there wasn't really that much information out there. And little by little, more information is starting to trickle out. And I started looking at addresses that were attached to some of these organizations associated with this Pueblos Sin Fronteras, if you remember those, People Without Borders. And
again, say the name of that in English.
People Without Borders.
People Without Borders. Okay.
And I found a secondary group that runs right along parallel with them, another one called Center Without Borders. And I was like, okay, that's interesting. I looked at both their addresses, and coincidentally, they both have the same address.
No.
And I was like, huh. And so I started looking at other groups around them, and they all kind of sound similar. They're like community organizer, community organizer, community organizer. And of course, as all progressive stories lead, they all lead in Chicago, Illinois, of course. We'll go in.
So these are south of the border organizations that all lead to Chicago.
Mm-hmm. And more specifically, a church in Chicago.
Who would? Now, I'm going to go out on a limb. Is this a social justice church?
Yeah. The only way to do this is to put this on a chalkboard because the connections will absolutely blow your mind. Marxist-Leninist to the core. To the core. If you want to know where the entire sanctuary city movement started, these people. We're going to show you the actual faces, the names, the people that have been pushing this since the 1960s. It is absolutely nuts. And the weird thing is they've kept a very low profile. They haven't let their names out on a national scale, really. I mean, they've been doing these caravans for a long time, but we never heard about it until coincidentally now. And as you just pointed out, I mean, this is the main divisive issue all over the world. Like all over the world.
Yes.
And so it wasn't until recently that they were like, you know what? Now is the time. The iron is hot. Now is the time to strike. Why is that? Because I personally believe that they haven't had that top structure to support them until now. They now have the pieces in place to say, okay, now, let's push for this. Let's support this from the top, echelons of the government. While that's happening, we have these groups suddenly coming out.
So why do you say that they have the top level to support it when you have Donald Trump in office?
And that's something different from, say, like the President Obama days when it was like members of the executive.
Correct.
Now it's members of, top levels of Congress. they're actively supporting this. People like Nancy Pelosi, Chuck Schumer, they're lockstep with a lot of the things that some of these like bottom groups that are now pushing it. Now there is like they feel like they're getting the social contract that they can come out publicly, take the mask off, and say, yeah, this is just a means to an end. That's really all this is.
And the end is?
The end is a complete inside-out disruption within the federal government.